in Quebec. Another question to do with the use of French in federally regulated private businesses. This provision takes away the option for an entity that would be subject to administrative monetary penalties, taking the necessary measures to prevent the violation of the Official Languages Act. We heard the misgivings from Air Canada on this point. My office followed up with the Department of Canadian Heritage that gave us the following explanation, I quote, "Federal institutions have obligations for results and not of means. That kind of defence is not possible when it comes to violating language rights, given the very nature of those rights. These are fundamental rights. Moreover, the principle of real equality is such that that kind of defence is not possible." So here's my question. So that we can do our job when it comes to legislation, could you elaborate as to how the nature of language rights, or how due diligence arguments wouldn't be a possible argument when it comes to fighting for those rights? I'd like to hear your legal opinion in that respect. Is there somebody that would like to take a stab at that question? Well, I'll have a go first, but I didn't study the provision that you referred to in depth, Senator. But generally speaking, the explanation that you read does strike me as being accurate in the sense that, well, there is a reasoning as to why violating a language right would suggest that there wasn't an existence of a violation that would be determined objectively in an absolute manner. There's an obligation for results there. However, the circumstances might be relevant when it comes to the kind of administrative monetary penalty that might be imposed by the courts as by way of recourse. So an institution, for example, and this might have been unable to uphold its obligations, well, that's not the same kettle of fish as an institution that systematically refuses to put in place the mechanisms that enable it to meet the obligations of the Act. So one needs to be able to distinguish between those two. Professor Doucet, Ms. Newmark, would you like to tack on to that? No, I think that Professor Doucet explained that quite well. I haven't looked at that particular provision, so I can't elaborate on what the professor said, and I support what he said 100%. Ms. Newmark, I also share Professor Eastar's opinion. I think it's more subtle than simply saying there's an obligation for results, period. There are always mitigating circumstances, extenuating circumstances before one draws any conclusion in that respect. Let's